That is the wind a-whistling. Hello again. This is I Go Travel with Don Barnett. We were in the state of Kansas and pulled off the interstate to get a break from the wind. Every place has a story, and we discovered a couple of really good ones here. Come on, I'll tell you about them. You have to get off of that interstate highway and pull into the towns and to the back roads, the two-lane roads, even dirt roads, and see what made America grow over the decades. So this video is on Eisenhower, and a couple of videos on him, one as a president and a war general in the Second World War. He was the president when they dropped the atomic bomb. We are rolling down Interstate 70 across the state of Kansas. Flat, wide, open country. Great for big wheat fields and other agriculture. Let's pull into Abilene, one of the towns along the way. You never know what you might see and find out. Just look at that grass blowing in the wind. Abilene is well known for two or three things. It is the Greyhound Museum, National Museum down here. But it's also the homeland of one of the American presidents, Dwight Eisenhower, who was president, the head of the armed command at the end of the Second World War, and was elected president afterwards. Dwight Eisenhower grew up in Abilene and is buried here. He was the top general in World War II and was instrumental in planning the Allied invasion of Normandy in France. Canadians were sent headlong into the most difficult part of the French coast that was controlled by Nazi Germany. British and American commanders sent troops from another country, Canada, into the first assault when most casualties occurred. It was better than sending your own troops into a hot spot. By the time the Allied forces decided to attack German military positions in France, the war was basically over. The Russians were driving the German army back across Russia, and one possibility was that if the Allied forces did not get their act together and get involved in this war in a serious way, the Russians were going to push the German military back right into Germany and eventually take over Germany. And that was the real reason for the attack, the Allied attack at Normandy. Just a little on Eisenhower, or Ike as he was called. Not all generals agreed on the conduct of war, and Ike disagreed with others on a couple of items. He disagreed with Britain's Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill. Churchill wanted to bomb only the German military positions and factories. Ike believed that the key to victory was through bombing and destroying German infrastructure that had been built up in France, mainly the railway network. Ike believed that knocking out the railway system would make it impossible for Germany to move supplies and troops. And this difference of opinion almost led Eisenhower to resigning from his position as commander from the American perspective. This is one of the statues of Eisenhower that's in one of the parks in town. The Air Force command of both Britain and the U.S. wanted to show that the war could be won from the air only. Eisenhower knew better. Destroy the railway infrastructure and put boots on the ground. Ike felt that sending in the army, then that was how to best win the war. This is Dwight Eisenhower's boyhood home that is in the middle part of Abilene. You can take a tour of the home. Eisenhower opposed other Allied commanders over the debate on whether or not to drop the atomic bomb on Japan that created the single greatest act of terrorism against innocent people that morning in downtown Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Ike opposed this act because he felt it would harm for decades the recently acquired positive image across the world that the U.S. enjoyed. And he was right. But he was overruled by those who felt a long drawn out Pacific War would be most undesirable. The U.S. also feared the rising power of Russia. Russia had lost islands north of Japan during an earlier 1905 Russian-Japanese War, and were now in a position to retake the islands. Those favoring dropping the atomic bomb felt it would end the war quickly, before Russia had time to regroup and capture those northern islands. Ike lost the argument, and the two atomic bombs devastated Japan. This was one of the statues of Eisenhower that were on the grounds. And the area had both a presidential museum and library in the town. I knew a fellow who was an electrical engineer, and he worked for a big company that had military contracts with the U.S. government. And World War II, he was flown into Omaha, Nebraska, to Offutt Air Force Base. And he had to swear to secrecy. Couldn't even tell his family what he was doing. And he didn't know what he was doing. He was just wiring up an airplane. And they wired up a couple of airplanes. And they had no idea about what they were going to be used for. And then after they finished, the next day in the newspaper was the news that the Americans had dropped the atomic bomb. And they recognized the plane, the one plane that he worked mainly on was called the Ola Gay. And he recognized the name. He said, "Hey, that's the plane that we wired up here the other day." World War II had just finished, and it seemed natural and logical to elect a war hero and general. Voters had done the same thing after the Civil War. In the next election, they elected a war hero, a general who had led the North successfully against the Confederate South. In those days earlier, the general who led the North in the war was Ulysses Grant. And right after the Civil War, he was elected president. So a war hero after a major war was elected president each time. And in the case of Eisenhower, he was certainly well-liked and contributed significantly to the peacetime. Part of the peacetime thing, things were not so friendly with Russia. The Americans had refused, along with the British, to send troops in to help the Russians fight the Germans. And Stalin, the head of Russia, never forgave the West. And he was cool to the West. But after the war, Stalin died, and new leadership occurred in Russia, and the Cold War simmered down. Eisenhower's contribution on the international stage is undeniable. Besides his military leadership in World War II, he negotiated both an international agreement to not use nuclear weapons in war, and also negotiated a conclusion to the Korean War. Also, his efforts helped thaw the hostile Cold War with the Soviet Union, as Russia was called back then. You can find on this same playlist in my channel on YouTube, I made a video about the missile sites in South Dakota, and I talk about the Cold War in that video as well. So click on to the Great American Great Plains playlist, and you'll find that video in there. To see my other videos that I've made, as it says in the bottom there, just Google the little @ at Don Barnett 5090. Hit the word playlists that's in the middle of the screen and scroll down, Each playlist contains several travel videos. And hit the subscribe button, and that will tell you when we're putting more videos on the internet. And that is what we are going to be doing. So long for now.